Good afternoon. Welcome to the CBI webinar about the European Green Deal. We're happy to have you here and we're looking forward to sharing the information that we have available with you today. My name is Tonia Dabwe. I am the founder and CEO of GuideMyGrowth.com, through which I work with mainly companies in developing countries to improve their profitability, to deal with funding issues, as well as to help them grow their businesses. Today, my main role is to make sure that everything goes smoothly in this webinar and that you get the information that you need to know everything you need to know about the European Green Deal and to use that information for your business as well, obviously. First, a couple of housekeeping points. We are using GoToWebinar today, and I am going to move my slide so that you get to see the key points that we'd like to share with you. We are using GoToWebinar today, as I said, and please note that we cannot hear you and we cannot see you. You also cannot hear or see each other. However, you can, if things go well, hear and see us. Should you be facing any technical difficulties, please do try at first to log in again using the link that you received in the email. If that really doesn't work, you can also join the webinar through your phone, calling the number that you received in the invitation email. It is a local number, so you're not making any international call. If you have a question, please use the questions tab that you see at the right if you are using a laptop. And if you are on the mobile application for GoToWebinar, you're going to find that in the menu for GoToWebinar. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask them at any time. We are here, our team is at the back waiting for your questions, and we're eager to answer them. We are going to be running a couple of polls to learn a bit more about you. I think you already saw the first poll that I'm going to ask you in a couple of seconds, which is basically where are you based, where's your organization based? But we're going to be running a couple of polls throughout the webinar to get to know a bit more about you and also to invite you to tell us what topics you would like to know more about, because there is a lot of information to share. We are recording the session. So we don't see your faces, so obviously your privacy is guaranteed. But in case you have any technical issues or run into problems or have to leave early or anything, don't worry, we're recording the session and we are going to send you an email at the end of the webinar, which contains a link to the recording, but also a link to the study that we did about the European Green Deal. So you can just, at your leisure, review the webinar anytime you'd like to. As I said, this webinar is based on our study about the European Green Deal. The full study is available on the CBI website, and we will be showing you where to find the study at the end of the webinar. So, as I said, we have a couple of polls, and I'd like to start off with our initial poll, which is, where are you based, your organization, BSO, or business? Launching the poll now. Okay, we're seeing a lot of Asia being represented here today. Welcome to you. Africa, welcome. South America, welcome too. Europe, a lot of colleagues here from European countries. And North America or Australia, welcome to you too. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you who are present today. I'm closing the poll. If you haven't voted, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here are the results of the poll. Welcome to all of you. So we have a lot of information to share with you today, and I would like to tell you that the main things that we are going to tell you, the main things that we are going to tell you the main things that you need to know about the European Green Deal, and that will be done by our experts who are present with us today. We're going to be telling you what the Green Deal is. We're going to be telling you what the key strategies are, and we are going to tell you what exporters to the EU can expect from the EU Green Deal. There's still a lot of information that is not yet clear because, as you know, the Green Deal is fairly new and not all information has yet been translated into legislation. We expect that to happen in the coming years. We will be sharing with you as much as we can already. At this time, I would like to invite Thomas Vonk from CBI. CBI, as you know, is the organization that does the market research. I would like to invite Thomas Vonk from CBI to come online and to welcome all of our attendees. Thomas?
Yes, thank you, Tonia. Just me put it on slideshow. First of all, I'd like to welcome all CBI companies and partners of our projects, and also, of course, a very warm welcome to all other participants joining us today. I am Thomas Vonk, and I work for the market intelligence team of CBI. For participants new to CBI, let me briefly introduce CBI. Our mission is to support the transition towards inclusive and sustainable economies. And we do that by supporting local SMEs through exports of value-added products to the European market. And with that work, we support the United Nations goals number 8, 12, 5, and 17, being decent work and economic growth, responsible consumption and production, gender equality, and partnership for the goals. CBI is active in 14 sectors shown here on the screen, and we can start new projects in about 24 countries, which are mainly in Africa and Asia. The work that CBI does, CBI offers projects with training sessions and expert coaching for small and medium-sized enterprises in the countries I just mentioned. And we offer a broad range of market studies and market information with also tips that can help SMEs realizing their export ambitions to Europe. So in the session of today is part of that. We believe the European Green Deal will bring many changes for exporters to Europe. Not necessarily at this moment or in the coming months, but in the near future it will. And this session is to inform you what the Green Deal exactly is and how you can prepare for it, as far as we now know. So I wish everyone lots of inspiration and a good session. And yeah, do not forget to ask your questions in the question pane on the right of your screen. Thank you. Back to you, Tonia.
Thank you, Thomas. And I would now like to invite Jasmine and Dania, who are joining us from Profundo, Dania Quiroz and Jasmine Arnould. I'd like to invite you to turn on your cameras and introduce yourself to our audience. Jasmine?
Hi, everyone. Should I?
Okay. Dania?
Hi, sorry. Yes, hi, I am Dania. I am Profundo's senior field researcher. That means that I coordinate Profundo's field work, of which there hasn't been much in the past 18 months. I also do research on value chains and human rights. And in the past, I've had the pleasure to work for CBI on a number of projects. That's it from my side.
And I'm Jasmine. I am also a researcher with Profundo. I work very closely with Diana on a variety of projects, but my expertise lies mainly in global supply chains and especially in agricultural commodity supply chains and the ways that companies work together to create more sustainable practices. So I'm very pleased to be here today.
Glad to hear that and welcome. And may I now invite Kees Blokland, who is joining us from Global Trading and Agency. He's currently based, I think, in Sliedrecht, if I'm correct. Kees, are you online? Sliedrecht in the Netherlands. Hi, welcome. Could you introduce yourself to our audience?
So thank you, Tonia, for introducing me. I'm the Director of Global Trading and Agency, BV. We are a daughter company of the company Nuts 2, of which I'm the Commercial Director. We are a processor and trader in all kinds of tree nuts. And tree nuts are cashew nuts, macadamias, pecans, walnuts, etc. So all the snack items, but also used in various ingredients and industries. And I'm glad to tell you a little bit about what we are doing, especially on cashews and pecans in Africa.
And we're looking forward to hearing about that, because it seems that what you guys are doing is effectively a best practice when it comes to the European Green Deal. And I think a lot of our listeners are going to be eager to learn from your experience. Thank you, Kees. We are now going to move to the first presentation. So I am going to go off camera and I am inviting Jasmine and Diana to take over from me.
Thank you. All right. I'm not sure I have the control of the presentation. All right. Yes. Thank you. Yes. So I will be introducing to you the EU Green Deal. Oh, apologies for that. So first of all, what is the EU Green Deal? The EU Green Deal is the European Union's response to the global climate emergency, and it comprises a set of policies that have the aim to transform the EU into a climate neutral and resource efficient economy by 2050. And the deal covers all sectors of the economy, from agriculture to energy and from transport to construction. And it also includes key policies and measures such as the Farm to Fork strategy and the new Circular Economy Action Plan, of which we will be telling you a little bit more in a moment. Yeah, so the EU Green Deal was presented on the 11th of December 2019 by the European Commission. And it is the first set of legislative proposals that was launched on the 14th of July 2021. So these proposals include 8 policy areas, such as increasing the EU's climate ambitions by for 2030 and for 2050, and also achieving zero pollution and eliminating all toxic substances, also producing and consuming clean, affordable, and safe energy, as well as preserving and restoring ecosystems and biodiversity. The EU Green Deal also calls, apologies for that, for mobilizing the industry for a cleaner and sustainable economy. And this is actually one of the main objectives of the Circular Economy Action Plan, which Jasmine will be introducing in a short while. And also achieving a fair, healthy, and environmentally friendly food system, which is also the main objective of the Farm to Fork strategy, which I will be speaking of in a little moment. Other policy areas that are included by the EGD, by the European Green Deal, is making efficient use of energy and resources in the construction sector and accelerating the transition to sustainable and smart mobility. Now, what is the Farm to Fork strategy, you might be asking? The Farm to Fork strategy is one of the main steps to make Europe climate neutral by 2050. And Farm to Fork aims to transform our food system into one that is fair, healthy, and environmentally friendly. And to achieve this, Farm to Fork sets regulatory and non-regulatory initiatives that support just and fair transition. Farm to Fork was launched on the 20th of May 2020 with the goal to reduce the European Union's food system environmental and climate footprint, as well as to reverse the loss of biodiversity. And in this context, Farm to Fork seeks to reduce the food waste to start off with, but also to ensure that there is sufficient and affordable supply of foods for all of the EU citizens, but also at the same time guaranteeing that farmers receive a fair price for their products and that the EU remains competitive at a global scale. So Farm to Fork aims to reach 5 main targets by 2030, including cutting down on chemical pesticides by 50%, cutting down nutrient losses and sales of antibiotics for farm animals by at least 50% too. Also reducing the use of fertilizers by at least 25%. And as part of the actions that are required to achieve these objectives, the EU is planning the revision of many existing regulations. This is important to note. I'll tell you why later. So revising these existing regulations for food and agriculture, as well as the creation of new rules and the improvement of coordination tools within the EU. Right. But we still know very little, as Tonia was saying before, about the changes that Farm to Fork or the European Green Deal in general is going to bring. And what I can already tell you is that it is expected that business will have to change the way they produce, transport, distribute, and market food. And in this context, the most immediate impact of the Farm to Fork strategies on businesses that export to Europe will be the new Common Agricultural Policy, which will enter into force in 2023. And businesses from non-European or non-EU countries exporting to the EU will have to comply with more stricter regulations regarding labeling and information of the products that they export. There are also potentially impactful regulations that will enter into force also in the coming 3 to 10 years. For example, there is the Action Plan for Integrated Nutrient Management to reduce pollution from fertilizers, which will include considerations of impacts of fertilizers, not only on human health, as is currently the case, but also on the environment. And this will very likely result in more restrictions for the type and amount of chemicals that are used in agriculture. And this will have consequences for the business model of enterprises that are producing under a conventional agricultural regime. There are also other possible changes that could include the type of genetic technologies that are allowed in plant breeding and also animal husbandry, and also the cultivation and types of materials used to package raw materials and specially processed products. All right, and now I'm going to hand over to Jasmine so that she can tell you a little bit more about the Circular Economy Action Plan. Jasmine, over to you.
Thanks, Diana. I believe you can all see the screen. And like Diana said, today I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the Circular Economy Action Plan and the main parts of this plan that impact you. So the Circular Economy Action Plan is a key part of the EU Green Deal. It's a plan, so it's a document that lays out the EU's vision for how to move from a linear economy to circular economy. And even though it's one plan, one vision, it's actually made up of a lot of different initiatives similar to the Farm to Fork strategy. Yeah, comprises a lot of different ways to get the EU from linear to circular. So the main question, what is a linear economy? That's essentially what we call the current system that we operate in. It follows more or less this sort of process where we take natural resources to create our products. You know, some of these natural resources are finite or can't be reproduced, like metals. Then these products are used for often a very short amount of time, sometimes only once, you know, like we use a plastic or a wooden spoon and then we throw it out. And, you know, the products that we use are designed that way, especially in the EU, often to be convenient to consumers. Then after the products are used, they're thrown away where they end up in a landfill or get exported to a different country to be sorted there. And we know that, you know, there are lots of recycling initiatives, and sometimes the products that we throw away do get recycled, but overall it's a very small amount of what we consume in the EU. Sometimes as little as 1% in the case of the textiles industry. So of course the system creates a lot of negative impacts, especially on the environment. We have, you know, wasted materials that are going into the products that we throw away, things we could be recycling that we don't, textiles, plastics, metals, food, energy, and so on. So, you know, you're not only wasting the materials, you're wasting the value in those materials, and the economic value could still be bringing in the current economy. And then, of course, when we throw things out, they pollute the environment and degrade the environment in all sorts of different ways. So the goal is to move from this to a circular economy. So in theory, this circular economy would operate in a very, very drastically different way. Raw materials would be used to make products, but these products are designed to be sustainable, to last a long time, to be taken apart and reused, you know, in different component parts, or be reused as one, to be recycled in all its different materials, and to be, essentially, they're designed to be kept in the system so that we can use them in different ways and for a very long time. When these products, you know, when there are parts of these products that can be reused, of course, there's always going to be maybe some amount of waste. That waste doesn't cause a pollution and degrade the environment. So there's the circular thinking really applies to all aspects of a product's life cycle, and this is the goal that the EU would like to bring through its circular economy action plan.
Jasmine, I'm just breaking in very quickly because your slides were frozen, I believe. So I have taken over the presentation of the slides, and I'm showing currently the slide that is showing the circular economy.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, I did notice a glitch, and so thanks for doing that. We can stick to this slide for just 1 second. I was just finishing saying that this circular economic system would, in theory, create a lot of positive impacts as opposed to the linear economy. So there'd be less waste and pollution. The value of products and materials are kept in our system for as long as possible. This creates jobs and business opportunities and all sorts of opportunities for innovation, of new materials, of new designs, of new ways of using things. An important aspect for the EU is that it would also alleviate supply risks, so especially for materials that are difficult to get or come from far away. For example, that you'd be able to use materials in theory that were being recycled from secondhand materials within the EU. So the circular economy plan announced initiatives all along this life cycle of products. And at the moment, they're prioritizing what they're calling high waste and high potential supply chains, and this includes packaging, plastics, and textiles. So these are forming kind of the core concerns currently of the Circular Economy Action Plan and its initiatives. So next slide, please, Tania. So like I said, the plan is made up of quite a few different initiatives. Here I've picked out 4 that I think are particularly relevant to trading partners of the EU. And I can go into more, I might go into more detail later on some of them if you pick them in the next poll. But essentially we have 3 different proposals for legislation. So there are being rules that there are proposals to put some of these rules into law, and that includes substantiating green claims, so the ways that companies here in the EU have to report about the environmental footprint of their products. There's a proposal for a law on reducing overpackaging and packaging waste, and there's a law being proposed for designing sustainable products. And then finally, I added the EU strategy for sustainable textiles because I know this is a very big industry that CBI covers. And this strategy is a very, very important, I guess, document that's going to be published soon by the EU, and which will essentially lay out what many different stakeholders in the EU in this industry have identified, and probably even further afield from the EU, have identified as the main components of the sustainable textiles industry. All of these were, the proposals for these and the draft strategy were all supposed to come out this year, but that's been delayed, so they'll be coming out early next year, hopefully, and at which point we'll have a better idea concretely of what this all means. So Tania, you can pass on.
Yes, and I think this is where I'd like to invite Hester to come online, because Jasmine, this was your last slide. And we have the good fortune today. Hello, Hester. Thank you for joining us. We have the good fortune today to have Hester Brink with us. Hester is a researcher at the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency. And Hester, maybe you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Tonia. Yes, happy to be here today. I work at PBL, the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency, as you said, where I do research on the impacts of a Dutch transition to a circular economy on low and middle income countries. So I've looked at a couple of value chains and happy to share some insights with you today.
And we are going to be hearing from you later on in a webinar, and we're very excited to hear what you have to say. But having heard what Dania and Jasmine have shared with us so far in their presentations, what can you tell us at this time?
Well, I think at this stage, I would like to emphasize just the level of ambition that these documents or these policy documents or strategies are laying out. This is quite something that we, some targets we've set for ourselves to achieve in the EU, and I think that there will be quite drastic consequences for trade. I'm sorry, Tonia, I can't hear you anymore.
I'm sorry, I had muted myself. Thank you, Hester. Before we move to our first Q&A session, I'd like to launch a second poll for our audience. And this is based on what you've heard so far. Launching the poll now. And basically the question is, which of the following elements are of most concern to you? You've heard the presentations from Dania and Jasmine, and you've heard the very initial response that Hester gave just now. And we'd like to know, what are you most worried about? I'm letting the poll run for about 15 more seconds. Okay, thank you for voting. I'm closing it down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And as you can see, there's quite a wide variety of concerns here. May I invite Jasmine and Hester and Dania to come back online? Dania, Jasmine, Hester?
Yes, hi.
Yeah, there you are. When you see the results from the poll, what do you think? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you see these results? Hester.
Well, it's interesting. It's a different outcome from the last time we did this webinar. But I think it's interesting that quite a few people are concerned about transparency, about reporting and monitoring. And I think it's also interesting to see that there is less concern about the use of antibiotics on livestock. But yeah, I can elaborate on that a bit more in my later on
presentation. Yeah. Jasmine and Hester, what are your thoughts seeing these results?
I'm also surprised to see quite a different set of results compared to the last time. Last time, people had voted overwhelmingly that they were the most concerned about having to provide more information about production and supply chain practices. So I don't know, we must have a very different demographic today, perhaps. But certainly we can dive into the details of all this in a sec.
Okay, Dania, anything to add?
Yes, I agree with Hester and Jasmine that this is quite a different result, and indeed it probably tells us about a little bit about the audience. I would expect from these results that most people are in the agricultural sector, are exporting into Europe agricultural products, and yeah, it follows that they're concerned about the use of fertilizers and pesticides, but also the type of packaging. Probably I can imagine retail, that we might have quite a few people in retail in this audience, and therefore they're also concerned about packaging.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very interesting segue to the presentations that we're going to listen to after the first Q&A. And I'd like to bring up two questions that we have in this first Q&A, and to our audience, if you have questions, please share them in the questions tab. I'm going to start highlighting some of the questions that are coming in. Okay, so one of the questions that has come in from Nayana. Nayana asked, does it mean that it would ban plastic packaging altogether, or would it emphasize the alternatives? And Diana, I think this might have to do with your presentation.
Yeah, partly, but also with Jasmine. But I can start answering, and then Jess can just complement wherever I miss anything. Yeah, I think it's both things. So reducing certainly is a large component of this, but also emphasizing on alternatives that are more environmentally friendly, like biodegradable packaging and so on. Yeah, Jasmine, I don't know if you agree with me or.
Yeah, exactly. So the initiative currently is looking at, or the initiative under the Circular Economy Plan is currently looking at reducing over packaging, which hasn't been defined yet, and changing the types of packaging materials. The details haven't been fleshed out, but I would be very surprised to see if they banned plastic packaging altogether. I think that's necessary probably, but not very realistic.
Something we're going to see in the short-term future in any case. Coming back to the poll results that we just saw, I'm actually curious because we've seen a lot of concern about fertilizers, we see concern about packaging, we've seen concern about waste, etc. One might think that the EU has introduced the Green Deal to try and make it more difficult for suppliers from producing countries to actually export to the EU. Is that maybe a background idea to the creation of the EU Green Deal?
I don't think so, certainly not. I think ultimately the goal is to, well, transform our economy into one that is more sustainable. Of course, this will bring about quite a lot of changes, and indeed regulations are set to become stricter, not only for exporters to the EU, but also for producers in the EU. So yeah, as any transition, I think there will be a lot of challenges, but in the end, the ultimate goal will be to decrease our carbon footprint.
Okay, thank you. We have a question that came in from Ziauddin, and it's a long question, so I'm trying to. Okay, industry needs high power water treatment plant because water has chemicals, and finally this water goes to the ocean. I'm not entirely sure what the question is. Ziauddin, could you please rephrase the question or please add to the question to clarify it? I'm not entirely sure if this is a question or a comment for our panels. We have a question that came in from Norieta, and she asks, what is the future of Roto bag as sustainable packaging? Jasmine?
I had to Google what Roto bag was, but it seems to be like a sort of canvas tote. I don't think that will fall under the remit of sustainable packaging, right? It's a type of cotton bag. Thanks, Joseph. I don't think that will fall under the remit of sustainable packaging. I think that's, you know, what we use at the very end of the consumption line to bring goods home, or you know, maybe between yeah, it's mostly between retail and the consumer. I think what the initiative will be targeting is industrial forms of packaging. So, you know, when huge containers of fruits or vegetables or nuts or textiles are shipped between countries, the things that are packaging those, or between, you know, when it goes from, sorry, there's a fly, when it goes from, when products go from manufacturing stage to retail, there's a lot of packaging is there, you know, how can that be alleviated? But thank you for the question.
Okay, and Hester has lost sound, so I'm not going to ask her to comment right now. Hester, if you can hear me, we will get back to you in the second part of the presentation. May I invite Jasmine and Diana to continue with a short presentation about how exports to the EU are going to be affected. And I believe Diana is going to open.
No, it's actually Jasmine.
Jasmine is going to open the presentation. Okay, Jasmine, there you go.
Thanks, Tonia. So we have a few main points about how we think the imports to the EU are impacted. And these are fairly high level because, as we've said already, there's not a whole lot of detail known at the moment about the way the EU Green Deal will be implemented and the way that the farm to fork strategies and the CEAP plan, the Circular Economy Action Plan will actually be detailed and implemented. So for the moment, we're working off of what the grand outlines of these plans are looking like, and in the case of the farm to fork strategy, what some of the laws are already saying. But essentially, we think that there will be 4 kind of main things that you can look forward to. So unsurprisingly, the EU Green Deal is aiming to implement higher standards for social and environmental sustainability in the way goods are processed, produced, etc. This includes some of the things we've already said: a potential ban on certain pesticides, new labeling requirements for organic products, less packaging or different types of packaging for products, and requirements for products to be designed to last longer, be reused and recycled, etc. So all of this will, could have potentially an impact on the way that you process or produce or package your goods. Now, again, it's not yet certain, what the laws will be like, whether there will be laws at all. Certainly, it will take several years for many of the regulations and directives that we're talking about today to be implemented, if they do. But the reality is that whether or not these become law or that these are implemented in the next 5 years or the next 10 years, there is a shift in the market currently for and there's a demand by consumers in the EU for goods that are produced responsibly, so which don't harm the environment and which respect human rights. So you may have already seen it amongst your buyers that they're asking for different types of materials, or they're asking for more information about where your products are coming from, how they're made, etc. And that should, in theory, only become more uniform and become stronger. And of course, standards already exist for what's considered sustainable in many types of commodities. Many products can be certified sustainable under different schemes. You might be selling to a buyer who has their own program to call something sustainable. And I say this because in theory, certifications should make your product more attractive on the market. It gives you a sort of benchmark to know what sustainability today will mean for your specific product or commodity. And yeah, if you're already bought into the system or thinking about the system, it could bring you premium prices. But of course, there are issues with the way it's implemented. Then the next main thing that you can really see across the various different strategies and plans is that there will certainly be an increased demand from your buyers for information on production and processing practices. So already you will know that as a basic step in being more sustainable or more responsible, some buyers ask for traceability in their supply chains. So they're asking you for information on how a product is made, where it come from, what practices are in place to ensure that, you know, the product can be said to be environmentally sustainable and to be respecting human rights. And often this information is used to communicate to buyers that the product is sustainable, but also to improve practices along the supply chain in best case scenarios. The law, only some of the buyers do this though, of course, and not all of the buyers, because it's not mandatory anywhere to be traceable, and especially not to collect sustainability information. But there are different laws being passed both within the EU Green Deal and outside of the Green Deal that will improve the laws around that and will require that companies in the EU downstream of supply chains have a much bigger responsibility to their consumers about what they're claiming is sustainable, and also to their suppliers and to producers upstream. They'll have a bigger responsibility in supporting sort of the sustainable transition. Now, this probably all sounds really daunting, but the sort of positive way you can put it is that in the long term, if you know these laws are put in place, and if you start paying attention to these new regulations and even just the voluntary standards that already exist for sustainability, you will you know theoretically be prepared for a global market that values sustainably produced goods and services. And it's not only the EU that's making these kinds of laws. The US and the UK are already also advancing on different laws around due diligence and in certain commodities, on certain issues, especially around forced labor. So there are advances being made, and eventually, hopefully, we'll all be living in this kind of world. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thank you, Jasmine. And for our audience, please don't go away, Jasmine. And I'm going to invite Dania to come back online as well, because we are going to ask our audience which policies they would like to know more about. I'm launching a poll, and please choose the policies, the key policies that you would really like to hear more about. And Jasmine and Dania will be sharing information about those policies with us in just a second. Okay. I'm giving it just a few more seconds. And I think most of our audience has voted. I'm going to close it down in 5, 2, and 1. Thank you for voting. And as we can see, there is a very clear interest in the new organics legislation, followed by followed by substantiation of green claims. So I believe we're going to be starting with Dania, and then Jasmine is going to share information with us about substantiating green claims. Dania, may I invite you?
Yes, thank you. May I ask you to forward to the policy we prepared, or to the slide we prepared on the new organics legislation, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. Yes, so the new organics legislation, which is actually its name is the Regulation on Organic Production and Labeling of Organic Products, It entered into force on the 1st of January, or it will enter into force on the 1st of January 2022, so very soon. And the aim is to strengthen the control system, helping to further build consumer confidence on the EU organic system. And the EU, as you might know, the EU regulations on organic farming are designed to provide a very clear structure for the production of organic crops. Well, not just crops, just foods across the whole the European Union, apologies. And this is to satisfy the consumer demand for trustworthy organic products while providing a fair marketplace for producers, distributors, and also marketers. So this means that organic food is also subject to control procedures to guarantee that this food has been produced and shipped in accordance with organic principles. And in this context, the changes that will be made under the new organics legislation will include the rules on labeling. The new organics legislation will not only cover the label of a product, but also apply to statements, indicators, trademarks, trade names, pictures, or even signs concerning a product on packaging documents, sign, labels, rings, bands, what have you, anything that accompanies or refers to a product. So also using terms such as organic or ecological, or shorter terms such as bio or eco, or yeah, those two basically, will only be allowed if the product is certified organic. And in consequence, the producers have to observe that the product packaging design is not dissimilar to the colors green and white and the shape of a leaf of the EU bio logo, because this could mislead consumers into believing that a product is organic, as it is the case at the moment. So labels for organic products that enter the EU must include the code number of the control body to which the producer is subject, and the place where the agricultural raw material of which the product is composed were grown. For example, EU or non-EU, or whether the product and its raw materials were partially or entirely produced in countries outside of the European Union. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Diana. I'm forwarding the slide to substantiation of green claims.
Thanks, Tonia. So this initiative it's essentially it's currently going to become a proposal for a regulation, so a law on the way that companies substantiate or prove how green their product is, or how environmentally sustainable their product is. So this really has to do with environmental factors. It does not look at human rights or any other social factors. Again, the draft hasn't been published yet, so we don't know exactly what they're thinking about. But the roadmap, which is the document that tells you a bit about, you know, what they're going to look into when they make the draft, tells us that the main mechanisms that they're thinking about to do this is to create a standard for providing reliable environmental information. So again, this really concerns the downstream companies, though those demands will get sort of filtered up the stream because of the supply chain. Because if your buyers need information about how green their product is, they're going to ask you, because that's where their products come from. So that's the main thing that they're looking into. Is it possible? Is it realistic to create a standard for providing this environmental information? Can buyers be held to this standard? Is it realistic for them to be asking all their suppliers about this information? Which brings me to the second point, which is that they're also looking at reducing and simplifying the administrative burden of collecting this information, especially for small and medium enterprises. So there is a recognition that it's a lot to keep such detailed track of how all the raw materials that go into a product are made, or even how one commodity is made, especially if, you know, upstream producers come from far away and there are you know, there can be a lot of complications in collecting that information, even for people in the country. So there is that recognition, and they haven't yet decided what it will look like to make companies substantiate their green claims. Yeah, a proposal for this kind of law will come out early next year, so we'll have to see.
And thank you for that, Jasmine. So basically, I think one of the key conclusions that we have here in this webinar is that a lot of information is actually not yet available. We aren't sure yet how these ambitions are going to be translated into practice or into laws that are going to govern the practice of the various exporters and buyers, importing countries as well. And I would now like to ask Kees Blokland to join us. I introduced him at the beginning of the presentation, and Kees is the Director of Global Trading and Agency, as well as the Commercial Director of Nuts2, and he's a board member of the Dutch Association for Subtropical Fruits, ambassador for the International Nut Council, and today he's going to be giving us a presentation about the work that Nuts2 does. And Nuts2 helps African farmers, as you see on the slide, to access global markets by investing in production facilities in various African countries. In case, I think what I really like about your presentation is that, in a sense, it is, as I said at the beginning of the webinar, a sort of best practice for the EGD, the European Green Deal. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite you to give your presentation.
Thank you very much, Tonia. I highly appreciate telling you a little bit more about what we are doing as the company Nuts2, mainly in Africa. As I said, we are a processor and a trader in all kind of tree nuts, but our focus is on cashew nut kernels and macadamias. Can you go to the and as the slide says, we are it's our goal to create a fair chain for Nuts2, and then in particular to all the partners involved in this chain. We started our business in 1993 as a broker in nuts and dried fruits, but we always had a warm heart for Africa, and that's how it started. We wanted to create a sustainable supply chain, which is traceable, which is transparent, where people know, where consumers know where the product is coming from. We wanted to stimulate the local economy, and I will tell you a little bit more about that later in my presentation. We want to build relationships, long-term relationships built on trust, on commitment with everybody involved in the chain. When you have a transparent, sustainable supply chain and you have partners you're working with, that's based on relation, because otherwise it's becoming very difficult. We want to take care of people and planet. We want to take care of nature and man/woman. We want to take care of our partners and of our employees, both here in our office in Holland, which is doing a lot of work, but also of our employees in Africa, which are working in two different factories, one in Burkina and one in Benin. Can we go to the next slide, please? As I said, our focus is on cashew nut kernels and on macadamias, and probably just to give, this is giving an overview of the production of cashew nut kernels. Everybody will know a cashew nut kernels as a snack item, most probably. It's very nice with a glass of wine, very nice with a glass of beer. It's having a lot of health claims. It's an ideal replacement for meat. So there is a lot to say about nuts in general. But what a lot of people don't know, where are cashews growing actually? Some people will know where it's processed, but most consumers will just buy it from the supermarket, snack it, eat it, love it, but do not know the history. But fact is that 54, and that number is an old number, it's coming closer to 60% now, of the cashews is grown in Africa. And then that's divided between West Africa and East Africa, where approximately 75% is coming from West Africa. And then I'm talking from Nigeria, Benin, Burkina Faso, Togo, all the way going west to Guinea-Bissau. And in Southern Africa, where is Kenya and Tanzania and Mozambique. But if you then look to the right side of the picture, then you get a big question mark in your eyes, I hope, as you see that 95% of the cashew nut kernels is processed in other parts of the world and not in Africa. So 95% of the African cashews is going to Asia and is processed in India and Vietnam. And only 5% is processed in Africa. And then when we are talking about the European Green Deal, then you can imagine that that's not the way we want to go. And I will tell you a bit more about it later. Can we go to the next slide, please, Tonia? What we do, I mean, we are source, we are market, and we invest. And that's as a company, Nuts2, what we do. I'm the director of global trading, which is the marketing agent who exclusively sells all the products we are processing in our factories, which is the bridge between supply and demand, building the long-term relationship between the processors and the customers. And we do that for all kind of nuts from all over the world, but we are specialized in, as I said earlier, cashews and macadamias from Africa. We also have a sourcing department who is buying the cashews and macadamias from our, we have a sourcing department working with the factories in Africa, but our factories are sourcing the cashew nuts directly from farmer groups. So we are in direct connection with the farmers. We process the nuts produced by those farmers in our own factories, and we market the kernels to the global food industry worldwide. But we also invest because we think that's crucial to have a successful business as well. So we are organizing crop finance for the factories. We are organizing training and equipment for the farmers. We advise them, we tell them, we teach them how to improve production per tree. And that's relatively simple. By just pruning the trees at the right moment, for example, you can get an increase in production between 25 and 40%. So that's significant without doing anything else than just to prune your trees at the right time. And we are building processing units to build the local economies. So we create employment there as well. Can we go to the next slide, please? Tonia, can we go to the next slide? Yes, thank you. Our role in the supply chain, as I said, we are building a relationship with the farmers, with the African farmers. So it's traceable. We are working with Farm Force so that our customers can log into the system and they know which lots they receive, to which area, country, farmer groups it comes from. We are doing a lot of product organic. In Burkina Faso, our factory is completely doing organic and or fair trade certified cashew nut kernels. We are promoting local processing. We have our own factory in Burkina Faso. We have our own factory in Benin, but we are also supporting factories in Togo, Guinea-Bissau, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, to help those local processors to market their product worldwide and let the world become aware that cashew nut kernels are mainly coming from Africa. In the next slide, I will come back on the CO2 reduction as well. Then we are going towards the consumer. We are building a relationship with the consumers as well. We are dealing with European supermarkets who say, okay, which farmer group are we buying from? Which factory is it processed in? How is it coming to Europe? What are you doing to take care of environment? And I will bring it to the consumer and tell them the story. And that's actually what we love to do. It's our dream for the past decade, 15 years, that there will come a barcode on a package of nuts, which you will scan, and then you will see where your product is coming from. And then the big question is, which customers, which supermarket chain, which consumer is ready to become Nuts2? Can we go to the next slide, please? As I said, for us, it's very important to build relationships, but it's also very important to take care of people and planet. And one of the reasons that we are processing in Africa, and I'm saying one of the reasons because it's not the main reason. The main reason is people, but planet is very important to us as well. A cashew nut kernel in shell, a cashew in shell, is 80% is waste and 20% you can consume. And if you can see the red dotted line on this picture, you see the travel of a in-shell cashew nut from West Africa to Asia, processed into kernel and shipped to Europe, while we are promoting and helping and supporting the green dotted line by processing it in Africa and then ship it to Europe. You can imagine that is saving an awful lot of CO2 emission. As I said, 90% of the African cashew nut kernels is close to 60% travels all the way from Asia to be shelled, peeled and packed, and only then travel back to Europe and the US, which are, after India, the main consuming countries. NUTS2 aims to maximize the amount of cashews processed in Africa, first and foremost to provide jobs and economic growth, but in the process we save an awful lot of CO2, 90% to be precise. That's approximately 9,000 kilos of CO2 saved per container shipped. And that's a lot of containers. Can we go to the next slide, please? Just a couple of numbers which I want to share with you. Where is it impacting? We are buying approximately 20,000 tons of in-shell cashew nuts. That's coming from, that means approximately just below 300 containers of cashew nut kernels. We are buying from approximately 4,500 farmers whom we are building relationship with and bringing them in direct contact with the factories. We are creating in our factories around 2,300 jobs. As you see in the picture as well, it's still a lot is done manually. 80% of our workers are female, 38% yield increase, as I told you before, and we are saving by processing in Africa about 2 million kilos of CO2 emission by processing in Africa instead of in Vietnam. Can we go to the next slide, please? Beside the projects we have in West Africa on cashew nuts, we are also doing a project in Southern Africa. We are supporting growing pecan trees in Zimbabwe, Zambia, and South Africa to support the local economy again. The fortunate thing is that those trees are absorbing quite a bit of CO2, about 20 kilos per tree every year. So that means that 145,000 pecan trees together absorb close to 300 million kilos of CO2 in their lifetime. And that equals to over 300,000 flights between Amsterdam and New York. A very positive thing is that a pecan tree continues to be a fruit, so is profitable to the farmer over 100 years of age. So, I mean, and that 100 years, it's also absorbing CO2. So that's a combination of absorbing CO2, giving a high value nut to the farmer, so an income for a farmer, and with global market demand constantly growing as nuts are having the health claims as I told you before. So for us, it's important to create a transparent chain. I was very happy with the comment Jasmine gave by saying if you do all that, then you will get premium prices. As a commercial director, I mean, I'm in favor of that, not to bring it back to our company, but to stimulate and support growth of nut processing in Africa, because there are a lot of natural resources, and with that we are helping the people there, but we're helping planet as well. It's very important for us to be social compliant, so therefore we are SMETA, which means SEDEX members ethical trade audit certified. We are caring about our food safety, so also about the consumers, but also about the people in the factory. We are BSC certified, which is food safety, organic fair trade certified, but most importantly, it's traceable and sustainable for consumers who are interested in that. I think that was my last slide, Tonia, and I think that covers it what I have to say.
That was your last slide indeed, Kees. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I would now like to invite Hester to respond to what has been said so far before we move into our second Q&A session. And then a good number of questions has come in on the questions tab as well. We'll be getting to them in just a few minutes. Hester, when I introduced Kees, I said that he was going to be telling us a story which was basically a best practice in light of the ambitions that the EU Green Deal has, particularly when it comes to transparency, accountability, monitoring. Did I say too much?
Well, I'm not very familiar with Kees's business, but it sounds like he's covering a lot of the bases with this presentation. Yeah, no, I think what sticks in my mind, what you just mentioned, Kees, is the amount of information that you need to keep track of and share with different stakeholders in your value chain, but also your business partners. It relates to, I think, one of the challenges for many businesses as well. There's so much that you need to monitor and report on. Yeah, no, that's it's very interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Hester, you're going to be taking us through a couple of no regret strategies. So Kees, I'd like to say thank you to you, and let's move over to Hester.
Thanks, Tonia. Yes, as I mentioned before, for this webinar, I think what stands out most for me is that there is going to be an increasing demand for transparency and accountability by various stakeholders in the EU and also in producer countries. And I'd like to zoom in on that a little bit more right now. I think we can expect that more and more governments and or social environmental organizations want to know what is going on throughout supply chains outside the EU. So there will be increasing pressure on business to provide this information. This means that buyers and their investors and their financiers will also ask for more information about business activities, about your employees, your environmental impacts or your social impacts. While it is to be expected that most mandatory reporting regulation in the EU will target larger businesses first, I think we can expect that this will also set the trend for also for smaller businesses to disclose information about their operations and their impacts, especially if they are part of larger supply chains. Regulation could be expanded to include SMEs exporting to the EU. But in the meantime, I think it's worth mentioning that voluntary disclosure can also contribute to increased comparability. It may give your business a comparative advantage. For example, if potential business partners or investors are implementing sustainability requirements, it is easier for them to assess your sustainability risks or the risks of doing business with you if information is readily available. What this means is that monitoring and reporting can make your company more attractive. In addition, I think that awareness and monitoring of sustainability risks can also have benefits for your company internally in the sense that it can help you navigate future challenges. Well, what does this mean? Basically, it can take many forms. Monitoring generally refers to keeping track of the sustainability risks and impacts on people and the environment that your business is exposed to. For instance, well, this may be different depending on the product that you produce or trading. You may be exposed to risks concerning the use of scarce resources, such as water. In dry areas, you may be involved in more challenging community relations near your business operations or concerning workers. Monitoring these issues is important, and being able to provide information on what you're doing about it is also very important. And then, in reporting, you basically disclose what your policies are, what your targets are, and how you're implementing these policies and how it's going, if you're making progress. So in most cases, it is just important to show that you are aware of the potential risks that your business may contribute to and what you aim to do about it. So you can make a public commitment to prevent, for instance, pollution, or you can commit to achieving a specific target by year X. And then the next step is to report on the progress made to address these risks and challenges that you identify. So yeah, for instance, the steps you've taken to decrease pollution or decrease water waste in your business operations. Yeah, and I think the presentations today have shown that we don't really know exactly how EU policies will directly affect SMEs that export to the EU, but still it makes sense for these SMEs to invest in setting up monitoring and reporting systems for their businesses if they haven't done so yet. And if you have, then I think it makes sense to expand on that. Information is going to be very important for any other business trying to enter the market, and also to be able to assess whether or not a business is meeting certain sustainability requirements. In general, you just need a lot of information. So the general trend does indicate that we can expect more demands for transparency and not less. Tonia, that's me. If anyone has questions, or yeah.
It is indeed, and thank you for that presentation, Hester. I would now like to invite Kees, Jasmine, and Diana to join us again as we move to our second Q&A session, and I'll be reading out the questions that our audience have put in the questions tab. So one question to start with is the following: will the environmental footprint, and this is a question from Ruben, will the environmental footprint be a way to measure if producing countries are complying with the Green Deal? Who'd like to take that question?
I can take that, since I think that's coming off the back of what I said about the potential law on substantiating green claims. Environmental footprint will be a way to measure. The honest answer is we don't know, because the laws and regulations haven't even been drafted, haven't been made public. So there's no way of knowing. But I think that it could become a big part of what happens with this law on substantiating green claims, because in fact, the EU has already developed a sort of standard around calculating environmental footprint for certain products, and they've been trialing it, I think, for the last like 5-10 years, for quite a long time. And it formed the basis for the proposal to have this law in place. Now, you know, how this will be implemented, again, we don't know, but the burden of substantiating green claims will lie with companies in the EU. So it's up to companies in the EU who are manufacturing and retailing and branding their products as sustainable or green to prove that claim to their consumers. And of course, that will mean, you know, asking for a lot of information from you and potentially have an impact on upstream supply chains, but they will have to calculate their environmental footprint. And how that impacts you, that's still
a question. And that's a very great segue into the next question that we received from Martin, who says a lot is still unclear about the European Green Deal, particularly when it comes to the regulations and the translation of those regulations into actual law. Is there a timeline in terms of when the gaps are going to be filled? Is there a timeline as to when the roadmap is going to be clear? Is there a roadmap? Diana?
Yes. So we know already that the timeline for the legislation that has been announced by the EU, and it will come into force, or not come into force, but planned and then come into force in the coming 2 or 3 years. Some of it already as early as the end of this year, beginning of next year. We don't know, though, whether there will be legislation at a later stage, and it is likely that it will, because some of the policy pieces are voluntary commitments, which are subject to revision and might later turn into regulatory frameworks. So it could be that they do, that at a later stage, they get revised, as it is with EU legislation. Yes, so there is a way to keep, or there are many ways to keep track of legislative changes, and these are provided in the EU market intelligence product that was elaborated specifically for the EU Green Deal. There are a few links that you can check out, where you can even set an alert or an alarm that informs you whenever a policy change is coming up, and you can just skip that on whatever comes next.
Okay, and just to confirm, Diana, where could people find that information and sign up for those alerts?
So if you go to CBI's website.
Okay, on the CBI website. Can we share that in the email, perhaps?
Yeah, I think so. It's yes, we can, and we will.
Okay, and I will ask CBI. Thomas is going to join us again before we close down the webinar, and I'm going to ask Thomas to maybe show us on the CBI website where we can sign up for those alerts. Thomas, there you are.
Okay, thank you, Tonia.
Could you show us that before we close down the webinar?
Can you already see my screen?
No, not yet. I would.
Because you wanted me to show where they can find the study, right?
Yes, but basically I would like you to show them where they can sign up for the alerts that Diana was just telling us about.
Yes.
But perhaps you can include that in your closing presentation, Thomas?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, perfect. Then I will continue with a couple of the questions that we have here, and we'll come back to you in a few minutes.
Okay.
Case, I would like to put a question to you. This is a question from Arthur, and he asks, in reducing the CO2 footprint, which nuts that are now sourced further away are expected to be sourced closer by, like in North Africa or on the Asian borders of Europe, or even within Europe, for example, as a result of climate change? Are we going to see replacement of nuts that are currently being sourced from distant countries that are going to be replaced by nuts grown or sourced from countries that are closer by to the EU?
That will be very difficult, because nuts need a certain climate. And you see where they grow now, that's the perfect environment, soil and climate, to grow those nuts. Cashew trees, for example, cannot handle frost. Then they die. So, I mean, that excludes a lot of countries immediately. So where it's possible, yes, it will be done. But especially for cashew nut kernels, as I told before, I think that a lot can be achieved by processing in Africa. And I think that is something we can help. The other nuts will be very difficult. I mean, you see it to a certain extent, but for example, to bring nuts to Europe, we do not have the climates where a nut can grow easily or quickly. So that will be very difficult.
That makes it very challenging indeed. Yeah, thank you, Kees. The next question is a general question that's come in from Tolga Erkan, and the question is basically asking for information about laboratories. I'm not quite sure if any of the panel members could respond to that very quickly. The question is, we want to export organic olive oil in bottles and packed dried nuts to EU countries from Turkey. We purchase olive oil and dried nuts from farmers and then pack them to export. Where should we test our products? In any laboratory in EU member countries or in Turkey? What do you recommend that we do? Who'd like to take that question? Any panel member?
I can answer that question. I mean, we do quite a bit of organic from Burkina Faso, and we are testing it in Europe. So we either take a laboratory in Germany or in Holland.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Kees. Let's see what we have here in further questions. When discussing organic policy from the European Green Deal, very often the topic under discussion is how much production within the EU is actually organic. Does it also apply to products that cannot be produced in Europe, like cashew nuts? If yes, how much, what percentage would you expect the EU to demand that imports need to be organic? So I think there are two questions in there. How much production within the EU is actually organic? I'm not sure if that information is being traced anywhere. Hester, maybe you know that from PBL? No. Diana or Jasmine? No.
No, unfortunately not. No.
Case, any brilliant insight into the percentage of organic
no,
production?
not in Europe, but I mean, I know that cashews as well as macadamias from Kenya, it's all smallholder farmers. And those smallholder farmers, I mean, they do even not have money to buy pesticides. So that is basically all organic. But to get it organic into the EU, the farmer groups needs to be certified. And that's sometimes a bit difficult for us, that we're saying, what the heck, they are certified or they are organic anyway, because they do not have money. But if they are not certified, they cannot sell it for the premium which is made for organic cashew nut kernels, because they are not certified.
Mm-hmm.
But I do not know the percentages of farmers or of products into the EU which are organic. No.
Okay. That ties into a question that we received from Martin, and his question specifically has to do with the carbon footprint, but I think it can be applied to basically everything that has to do with the EU Green Deal. He says, with regards to the carbon footprint, this is very difficult and costly to measure for a lot of products. And this question is actually targeted at CBI, but I'd like to put it in a broader perspective. Is there any guidance or support in terms of how to deal with this? Are there any grants available, or will any grants be made available for smallholders, for example, for farmers? Who'd like to take that question?
I would love to hear the answer. I can't answer the question.
I can imagine. I do know that I don't know the timeline, but I do know that there are plans to provide support to SMEs in developing countries, for example, through various embassies, European embassies. I think the Dutch embassy as well is planning to provide some support to SMEs that are transitioning to the Green Deal, but unfortunately, I don't know what the timeline for that is, and I'm not sure if there are any grants connected to that. I do believe that with the EU saying that they would like to be a world leader when it comes to climate problems and solving the climate change that we find ourselves confronted with, it wouldn't surprise me if they do make some grants available, but unfortunately I can't say when. We'll check this out. If we can find information about it, we'll share that with you in an email. Let's see what other questions we have received from our audience. Hester, I think this is a question that might be of interest to you. Is there any organization or any party that is monitoring the implementation of the EU Green Deal?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about the answer, though. At PBL, we monitor the transition here in the Netherlands for the circular economy goals, but I'm not sure which organization is monitoring it at the EU level for the Green Deal. But perhaps Dania or Jasmine have more information on that.
And I'm seeing a quick response coming in from Martin, who says that it's the EU Parliament who should actually monitor and evaluate the progress on the EU Green Deal. I'm not really sure about that, Martin. I think they already have so much to do. If we have to wait for them to actually pass a law to start monitoring and evaluating, it's going to take another 10 years before we actually see progress. I'm not sure if I'm really fascinated by that solution. I'm going to take one more question and then start rounding up the webinar. And that question particularly is another question from Martin. You're lucky today, Martin. And that question is, with regards to the water footprint, biodiversity footprint, and Martin says, how on earth do you measure this in a manageable way? Kees.
I really don't know. I don't know.
You measure a lot of information at Nuts too, right? With your own producers. I can imagine that it's quite a burden. How do you do it? How do you keep it manageable?
We're working with consultants or with NGOs who are helping us in that. We are part of the African Cashew Alliance and the ComCashew, which both organizations, we are one of the founders of African Cashew Alliance, started in 2005 to improve African processing of cashews. And they are getting in quite a bit of money to help us to monitor it and to work it out. And there are different systems. I mean, you want to make them as digital as possible. For example, when we are going to our smallholder farmers, we are labeling the bags with a barcode. We are simply with a cell phone, we are taking the barcode, then the information is automatically going to the factory. The factory knows exactly what's coming in from which farmer it is, and you work with the barcodes. So you're trying to make it as easy as possible to monitor as well, because otherwise it is impossible. So it's a very, very difficult thing.
Definitely, yeah. I said that was the last question, but one more question came in that I find really interesting, and I would like to address this question to the entire panel. And Jasmine and Dania, maybe I can start with you. The question is, there are two questions again, actually, and I'd like to focus on the second one. The question is, how big a risk is mandatory reporting for SMEs from developing countries? Do you think that this might lead to an increase in vertical integration, as in European companies setting up their own supply bases in, for example, Africa? As market researchers, Dania and Jasmine, what do you think?
Well, to be honest, I don't think there's much of a risk, but this is also a very not well-informed answer I'm giving you. Certainly, EU companies have a big role to play, helping SMEs make the transition as front runners, but also as the ultimate responsible to comply with these regulations, within their value chains and exports. But whether this will lead to SMEs losing control of their own business, I don't know. I'm not to say without being properly informed about what it would entail and how.
It could also be partnerships, not necessarily losing control. Jasmine, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Diana's response. I think there's so many factors that go into those kinds of shifts that it's just not possible to say, anything interesting at this moment without knowing more.
If I probably can add, I mean, we are working one supermarket we are working with already, but we are speaking terms with more supermarkets. Is that supermarket says, okay, what price are you buying from the farmer? Okay, this is the price. What is your cost for processing? What is your cost of transport? What is your cost of roasting and salting the cashew and putting it in a consumer pack? And we put it for that price on the shelf. And that's the complete transparency. And that's the vertical integration you're looking for. And that's what we would applaud. Because at the moment, we are, and sorry, I'm a bit skeptic at the moment because we only have one and a couple of other supermarkets on speaking terms. But with a lot of supermarket chains, it is still about corporate social responsibility is a big thing for them. 364 days a year. There is only one day a year that they are not that interested in it. And that's when they make their annual contract. Then it's about price. So, and sorry for being a bit skeptic, but I mean, I would love that first example, we would love to see that more and more into the business. Hey, let's build those relationships between and create that vertical integration and make the supermarket aware of what price are you paying to the farmers, what price are you paying to your workers in your factory, because then everything is transparent and everybody can earn his piece of bread and even butter and probably a bit of cheese. I'm from Holland, sorry. So, but then, I mean, then it's transparent, everybody knows about it. But let's not only chat, what we are doing at the moment a lot. And therefore, I think that that there was a question about law. I think law is important to help and stimulate importers, roasters, consumers to go that route and to really understand it. Because if we talk money, it's sometimes becoming a different story than when we are talking what is in our heart.
That's very interesting. And Case, in your case, you have chosen to be fully transparent and to focus on sustainability as a core part of doing business in your company. I'd like to move to Hester and invite her to end this panel, this Q&A panel. Hester, you do a lot of work in the textiles sector. You have a lot of information about textiles, correct? Or am I confusing you with Jasmine?
Well, we have just finished off a case study on textiles, but we haven't looked at the entire industry. We've looked at parts of it. So perhaps I can answer the question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I hope so, because I'm actually interested. As I said, Case's company has focused on sustainability, transparency, and accountability as a core part of doing business, and we are very familiar with the challenges that textiles and the entire textile industry is facing when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to equitable labor laws, when it comes to transparency, frankly. And I'm interested to know, just as a segue from this question about vertical integration and the partnerships that Case was actually asking for, do you see that happening in the textile sector?
That is not something that we looked at specifically. I think what I see, what we expect in the Netherlands at least, is that there's going to be more demands about the sustainability of the raw materials going into textiles, and also demands regarding recycled content, so recycled fibers being used to make new garments. These kinds of things that is being published, but I don't know exactly what kind of business partnerships this could translate to. But again, yeah, I said it before, for all of these things, you need to be able to show what you're doing. So you need to be able to share information, and it can be very challenging, but it is very likely that it will go that way.
So basically, I think the conclusion of today's webinar is that we are not yet done. There's definitely going to be another webinar in the future, sometime when we have more clarity about more issues that have been raised. Panel members, thank you so much for participating in the panel. I will give you a proper send-off before we end the panel, but for now I'd like to move over to Thomas and invite him to share some information to share where we can find the information on the CBI website. Thomas?
Thank you, Tonia. Okay, you already shared my screen. Thank you for that. Oh, this is not what I was looking for. Okay. Thank you. To close for today, I would like to show you where you can find the information and also the study of the Green Deal. So when you go to CBI.eu, you come on our website, and if you go to market information, you'll see all the sectors where we are active in. And just to, if you want to stay informed about our webinars, about new studies, you can subscribe on our newsletter. Then you will, it's a monthly newsletter. Then you will be always up to date on new studies published and on new webinars. You can also say, I'm only interested in news about a certain sector. and then you only get the webinars on that sector or the studies for that sector. So that's the Stay Informed, the newsletter. And so just these are our sectors, and let's just go to the fresh fruit and vegetable sector. And here you will see our website and the studies we offer. We offer a lot of tip studies to find buyers, how to do business, new study tips to go digital. And here under sector studies, you'll also find the Green Deal study. And here we have lots of specific studies on products and how to export to Europe these products. Just let me click on the Green Deal, because that's what we are talking about today. And here you will see the complete study. You can read it, and if you want, you can also download the research as a PDF, but it's probably better to read it on the screen. Yeah, I invite you all to visit our website and look for studies that are interesting and read the complete Green Deal study. And you can always ask questions.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. And I would like to invite our panel members back on the screen so that I can give you all a proper send-off. And in the meantime, as Thomas recommended, I recommend that you two visit the CBI website and have a look at the Green Deal information. As we close off this webinar, you're going to be presented with a quick evaluation form. We would very much appreciate it if you would fill it out and let us know how we have done. Where are there areas where we could improve? Was it perfect? If you think this webinar was horrible, give us a 1. If you think it was perfect, give us a 10. And we would appreciate it if the number is anywhere in between 1 and 10. CBI will be sending you an email with the link to the presentation, a link to the webinar recording, and a link to the EU Green Deal study. So if you missed parts of the webinar, I saw that a number of our attendees had to leave early and a couple of them were having some technical issues. If you missed part of the webinar, you can review it at your leisure. CBI organizes multiple webinars, so you might want to see if there are any that are of more interest to you. For that, go to the CBI website and just click on events. I happen to know that we have a webinar on specialty rice on November 9th and on apparel on November 12th. So there's also a webinar about dried mangoes on November 16th. So
and let me add one to that, Tonia, which we also have in November, the 25th of November, a webinar on blockchain in agricultural products.
There you go. If that is of interest to you, make sure to sign up for that webinar as well. That just leaves me to thank our experts, Diana, Jasmine, Hester, Kees. Thank you for sticking in there. We had a couple of technical difficulties behind the screens, and thank you for your flexibility. And I hope our audience didn't notice any of those problems. Thomas and the team at CBI, thank you for the support and thank you for being in the background and solving our technical issues to the best of your ability. And thank you to our audience for participating, for being here, and for asking so many questions in the questions tab. I hope it's been useful to you, and I trust we were able to give you some great ideas for your business. Have a wonderful afternoon, evening, morning, whatever time it is where you are, and see you next time. Goodbye.